Hello everyone, Andrew Martin here and welcome to my BCM Game of the Month for November 2012. And what a game it is for English chess fans, as it features the exciting recent clash between Grandmaster Boris Gelfand playing with white and Grandmaster Simon Williams playing with the black pieces. And it comes from the European Club Cup, which was recently concluded in Eilat, Israel. Now, of course, when you're black against Gelfand, you're really up against it. But Simon Williams is one of those fearless individuals who wouldn't mind that. He'd just see it as a challenge. And here he is playing his favourite classical Dutch, a bold move in itself against somebody of Gelfand's strength. Gelfand sticks with the main line against the erratic Williams. As I say, Williams is very capable of beating absolutely anybody on his day. He's also capable of losing to people who are much weaker than him because he has simply such a fearless style. So when up against somebody so unpredictable, I think Gelfand probably just had the simple game plan of sticking to tried and trusted moves and awaiting events. And here he is playing the main line. Williams plays his favourite classical move, d6, which he's played countless times before and which he's recorded about and written about frequently in the press and in the media. And now comes b4. Well, one big danger to black in this position is a queenside pawn advance by white. And here, white puts this mechanism into operation immediately. Formerly, this move was not thought to be very good because of the move e5. For instance, I recall a book by Robert Bellin in the Classical Dutch. That was one of my first introductions to this opening back in the 1970s, where e5 was simply touted as an easy equaliser for black. That's actually not quite true, and if we roll the line forward a little bit, we'll see why. Bishop takes b4. It was just felt that this position was okay for black. Well, actually, this position has been misassessed. It was misassessed, and knight d3 gives white quite a nice advantage in this position. White's got the initiative on the queen side. His bishop on g2 is very powerful. He has more pieces in meaningful play. And the black bishop on b4 is a bit of a liability. For instance, if black puts the bishop on a5, which is probably the best square to avoid getting hassled, then we get knight d2, and then after rook e8 we can play bishop b2. This position is very nice for white indeed, as after rook takes e2, knight b3 is a good move for white. As you can see, the bishop is very, very embarrassed. And just dropping back, if black goes c6 to try and blunt the diagonal, then bishop takes f6 is one way for white. White just has too easy a life in this variation and can get to a good position by simple means. So going back, Williams is not content with that and he hits out with a5, and of course white pushes on with b5, establishing a spatial advantage on the queen side. Now comes knight e4, and this is a move which Williams favours in most of the main lines of his interpretation of the classical Dutch. Knight on e4 clears the decks. It prepares for bishop f6. In general, black would like to probably exchange one or two pairs of minor pieces here to make his life a lot more easy. As you can see, there's a kind of traffic jam on the queen side, which the pawn on b5 is accentuating actually. And so knight e4 can be seen as a kind of attempt to equalise the position by saying to white, well, you've got to develop a queenside piece now, and then I'm going to exchange. So Gelfand refrains from moving his queenside minor pieces for the time being, and black plays bishop f6. That's all part of the programme. Bishop b2, not giving black an easy life to exchange off that knight. And now Williams pushes forward with a4. Well, I must say this position does look a little bit better for white. However, black plays it. There was a game Kunte versus Hanley played in Blackpool in 2003. Which was the only other game with this variation I could find. And there, white played the promising move a3, putting a halt to black's ambitions. Black played queen e8, white played knight c3, even allowing black to exchange off the knights. And now Hanley played the thematic move e5. But this game turned out to be a disaster for black, as white took on e5 and then played e4. Well, black has to play f4 in this position, and now white played the cold-blooded move g takes f4. This is a very good game by Kunte and shows the possibilities available to white in this line. Bishop e7, and now this excellent move e6, opening up lines for white's bishops. Hanley plays c6, white played rook fe1, black took on b5 twice, and now Kunti moved in powerfully with rook e5. Queen b3 was answered by queen d3, and rook d8 was answered by knight d4. It is very noticeable that the lag in development on the queen side is what's going to cost black in this game. The instant black moves his piece out on the queen side, he gets demolished by bishop takes c6 and then rook h5. A very powerful and extremely good attack there by Kunti. Hanley resigned. Going back to Gelfand versus Williams now, Gelfand plays a new move here with knight fd2. And Williams changes the nature of the position by setting up a stonewall structure after d5. But it must be said, white looks as though he's better here. And one way of maintaining white's edge, I think, would be to simply take on e4 and then play f3. That's the traditional way to try to destroy the black setup, and I think that would certainly have led to an advantage for white. Going back, Gelfand just prefers in the game to play knight a3. Williams continues setting up this stonewall structure, and now Gelfand plays rook a b1, bishop d7, and then rook f c1. Well, there were certainly other ways to play this position. I mean, if we drop back to c6, white could again consider knight takes e4 and then f3, although with the knight on a3 perhaps this is a little less powerful than before. He can also consider rook a d1, which is kind of a move which prefaces the idea of knight takes e4, followed by f3. I think if white plays rook a d1, he's probably thinking about f3 and then e4 sooner rather than later. But Gelfand chooses a different approach, just putting his rooks on the queenside files and anticipating the opening up of the game there. Williams played bishop e8, white played knight f3, and black pushed on with f4. Now, the classical Dutch is a surprising opening, and I think one of the reason Williams plays it is that the positions reached are very difficult to assess and can be very easily misjudged. If we just drop back to the position after rook fc1, it looks as though white has got a fairly steady advantage here. Black's knight on b8 and the rook on a8 are undeveloped. The pawn on a4 could become weak, but there's a lot of tension in this position. And as you'll see in the game, this move f4 and then f takes g3 certainly gives black very interesting chances on the king side. It may well be that Gelfand's plan of just putting the rooks on b1 and c1 turns out to be ineffectual, as after h takes g3, bishop g6, now black has turned the tables to an extent, as we see that possibly the white the white rooks are in tactically slightly unstable locations. Well, black hasn't got anything just yet, so white opens up the game with b takes c6 on the queen side. I guess Williams breathed a sigh of relief to a degree here because he can now bring the knight into the game, and the point of Gelfand's move was to create a square for his knight on a3. Bishop g5. A little bit awkward for white, but still, this should be good for white, or at least okay for him. Bishop a3 is a good move. Rook f7. Well, just dropping back, bishop takes c1 was certainly a candidate move here, and perhaps should have been preferred. And the point of this is that after bishop takes f8, we retreat our bishop to h6, he goes back to a3, and now d takes c4. Suddenly this position is not that easy for white at all, as after knight h4, which is probably the only move to try to exploit the looseness of black's minor pieces in the centre, black has queen f6, a sudden counter-attack against f2. And if bishop f3, we can now play the superb move, knight takes f2. If king takes f2, bishop takes b1, queen takes b1, and now g5. We can't really blame Simon Williams for not seeing this continuation or perhaps misassessing the position. You know, the nervous tension of having to play Gelfand with the black pieces must have been incredible, and just to get this position against him is an achievement in itself. But I do feel that bishop takes c1 was probably a better move than rook f7, although this move is also very reasonable. Well, Gelfand trades down. He takes on g5. He then takes on e4. And he plays queen e1. Note he is definitely trying to do without the move e3. Both now and earlier. Because he's a bit afraid that the f3 square could become very weak. Black pushed on boldly with e3. White played f3. And now Williams took the rook. Rook takes b1. And now rook f6. So black is the exchange up. It's a very fractured position where both sides have weaknesses, but by and large, I think one has to prefer black in this position, particularly after king g2, rook h6, where with queen h5 upcoming, white has a devil of a job restraining the black attack. Gelfand played g4. He must have known this was horrible, but he probably couldn't see any other way of preventing queen h5, and this does at least allow the white queen to come to g3. Just going back, if queen g1 in this position, then I think e5 is black's best. And after d5, pop the knight in on d4. Takes, rook takes b7, not fast enough. Queen h5 finishes the job. So just going back, that's why Gelfand played g4. Black played knight e7. Again, I think another chance goes begging here. Knight takes d4 was a really excellent move, but I'm not sure what the time position was on the clock here, but the point is that after knight takes d4, queen f4 with a double hit on the knight and h2. This should conclude matters fairly swiftly. But knight e7 was played. Bishop takes e7. Gelfand takes the chance to get rid of this knight, which could have added fuel to the flames against his king. Queen g3, rook d8, queen e5, and now queen h4 forces white to retreat. There was a repetition as both sides try to get closer to the time control, and now on with the game by Williams. Once he gets a winning position, or what he considers to be a better position, it doesn't matter who he's playing, he goes for it. Gelfand tries to create a square on d6 for his knight. Rook g5. If queen h4 in this position, queen f6, queen g3, queen f6, this is trying to improve the position of the queen. We have rook h1 and then rook h5. White can maybe defend. But in the game, black's play is much more incisive. He goes rook g5, queen takes e3, and now h5. I imagine this is extremely difficult to play against when you're short of time. Somebody going directly for the throat. Gelfand put his knight in on d6. Black took on g4, and now white went f4, making a desperate attempt to block the position. Queen g3. Well, rook takes b7 is an interesting move here, and the idea is to answer queen h4 with queen takes e6 check. Perhaps this was the last chance for Gelfand to try and save this game, as after king h8, I think white can draw this by perpetual check. Knight f7 check, king h7, and now knight g5 check. If rook takes g5 in this position, and then queen h3, this is only a draw, I think, as after queen g3, white could even play king f1, answering rook f8 check with rook f7. So this just goes to show Gelfand's short of time, the tension must be high. After queen g3, queen f6, we can now say that this is a winning position for black. The difference is that after rook takes b7 now, we have rook f8, and if e3 we have queen g6, threatening to infiltrate. f5 does not bail white out, as after e takes f5, queen f4, we have g3. So the game concluded. Queen takes g4, rook h6, threatening rook g6. f5 only holds the process up by one move. Knight e7 check, queen takes e7, queen takes g6, queen takes e2 check, king h3, and now rook d5. Rook takes d4 would also have done. White resigned. So what a fantastic victory there for the English Grandmaster against a most formidable opponent. I mean, you can hardly have a more formidable opponent, given that Gelfand has recently challenged for the World Championship match. A game for all English chess players to be proud of.